I'll tell you, when I got there in 14 at UAB, we had, about 40 guys that were injured, had surgery. They had won 5 games in 3 years. I don't even know what I would have done with the ability to go past, the 25-man roster, what that could have done to change, even though, you look back in hindsight and it makes the story so great when you were able to flip a roster. I say flip a roster, but take what you had, add to it, and then for us to get 6 wins in that year and get bowl eligible was a miracle. Now, our program gets shut down. I decided to stay. All that's been chronicled over and over and over. Kind of the reasons. I'm from here, and there was so much support of our folks that led to us bringing it back. We raised all this money, and so, but as that was starting, even before that started, you know, what would coach, would you stay? And so we've lost everybody. Every player is left, other than about a dozen guys, and most of those guys were injured. We had a few guys like Darius Williams that just decided he was not going to play anymore if he didn't play for UAB. But as that thought was coming out, that we might play, I'm like, what do we do? So I did look at SMU. I've talked about that probably in most of the articles that when people have interviewed me through the years. And the reason I used SMU was because that was the only thing close to what we had experienced, where you don't even have a team. You've got to immediately come back and play. We weren't going back to FCS. We weren't going back to Division II. We were going back to FBS in 2 years with about 12 guys. And I knew SMU had come back with high school players. Now, of course, that was a death penalty from recruiting violations, and ours was self-imposed. So, two different things. But them coming back with 18-year-old kids against 20, 21, 22-year-old guys that had been in a program, just there was no chance. And I think what did they lose? They lost every game for 2 years, and then I think they won one in the third year. And that was pretty much, I said, that's something we cannot do. We had a little bit of time, and it wasn't like we were some great name, because not only had we had turned around a program that had been losing, but we had no program. So now you've got people not even knowing whether to believe in this program or not. So that's where the junior college mindset came in, and which can be similar to what we're talking about with people flipping their rosters. But it allowed us to go across the country and really just say, all right, we got to get older. We've got to, we're going to go out and try and get people that look the part. And then this will be something I know we'll want to talk about, is how do you bring those guys together and create a family?
Before we get to the culture part of this, what about the pitch? When you're going to these junior college players, what are you trying to sell them on about the future of UAB football?
Yeah, so and I say this about coaches all the time. We're going to learn every good thing there is to know about a place, and I think for us it was, pretty simply, there's nowhere to go but up, and that's kind of tongue in cheek, but really it was, you've got to come in to play, and I think a kid that's coming from junior college, you quickly figure out there if they've if they've been thinking about it, they realize they've only got 2 to 3 years at max to play. And I told them, I said, look, you're going to go somewhere where you're going to be fighting to play, where you're going to come here and you have to play. So that was a pretty good pitch. The other pitch we had was, we got to sit out for a year. So, I really looked at a lot of guys that had been injured. They had been terrific players. Maybe they tore a labrum. Maybe they had hurt their knee. Come in here, get well, really get your academics, which, we had great academics at UAB, get this great degree, maybe even get a master's, get a double major, and start this program. And we called it the return. I don't know how, I kind of came up with that early on, and we started talking about the return. So we had something we were, I always say a catchy phrase. And then, but, my big deal was, come in here and make history. How many people really get to say that they made history in the game of college football? And I told them, I said, there's going to be some kind of history here, either good or bad, but you're going to be part of making history. So I think the playing time, and then the big thing for us, we had to go create better facilities, and so that was the one thing I said, to our guys that had gotten involved, and this was a lot of community guys that believed in Birmingham and knew how important UAB was for the community, and I'd say that about any football program, being the front porch of the university and a city. And so I think these guys understood. They really didn't maybe understood exactly how hard it was going to be. Thank God, or they probably wouldn't have done it. But we had to change our facilities, and that was the promise to these kids. We can't put them back in the horrible building we had. So we did go out and raise money and build facilities. So that was, I always say, you make a promise, you got to keep it. And so, I don't normally promise playing time ever. It's just you're going to get a chance to compete. This was different. We didn't have a team for that first year or so. But, I think, hey, the facilities are going to get better. We're going to make sure of that. And then everything else was pretty much there for the taking.
Bill, you mentioned that normally you don't promise playing time, and here you were able to obviously show them the route to playing time. I imagine, though, just in talking to the guys who are coaching college ball now, when they take transfers, they can kind of show that the path to playing time, maybe one guy at a position, maybe a second, but they're not able to necessarily flip a room, perhaps, of one position room, because guys look around and say, wait, you're already bringing him in as a transfer, and him and him.
Right.
Did it become harder to sell that playing time as you got into sort of that, like, the 22nd JUCO guy and the 30th junior college guy and transfer it? And how did you balance, like, not promising playing time at that point, but like how did you make all these guys who are about the same year or within a similar year of eligibility, how did you make them all believe that they would have a real shot for PT?
Well, I think, anybody that is the right competitor understands that we're taking multiple guys at the receiver position, the D line. I mean, they were coming in on the same visits together. So when I say promising playing time, that was kind of a joke that we don't have any players, you got to play. But I think we all have talked about the chance to play. And a kid's going to look at the roster. And he's going to say, well, you've got a running back who's all conference. You've got another one behind him who played. Here I am. Now, the competitor in you says you can beat this guy out versus I could say, here's the roster. There's nobody. Maybe I'm bringing another guy just like you, but he's not an entrenched starter. Now, if I'm doing it today, I think you're just selling the opportunity to play. You're selling the opportunity to play. You're also selling the opportunity to change, like we said, to make history, to change what's going on at a place. And, usually in this recruiting, and that was what happened with us, and it's happened really always, these guys start recruiting each other. And I think, we're not just trying to create playing time. This is football. Football players want to win games. And so, if he only cares about himself and he only cares about playing time, he's not really somebody I wanted either. I wanted guys that wanted to be part of a winning team. So we were talking about winning. We were talking about creating a team. And so they were recruiting each other. So it became a lot more than just individual playing. Because I don't, when you start talking about, hey, I'm playing, but I'm on a horrible team, I don't know for a real football player how exciting that is either.
It's toxic for a locker room too, I would imagine.
Yeah. I'm just, I think, and it's so funny because I'm the person that would go so far to not ever promise somebody something that we couldn't deliver on, because once you get that guy there, he's there and he starts saying, wait a second, I was told X, Y, and Z. And that's why I laugh about the facilities. We had to have those. And I told guys, you're going to find me in a hole somewhere because I promised these guys this. And, and I don't like making promises I can't keep. Because we want to be, in truth and in reality. So I think that's the thing we always talk about in recruiting. And anybody that knows any good looks for guys that love the game. And, when you love the game, you understand there's competition, there's training, there's all those things that go with it. But I do think the ability to go and get 25, over 25 players is life-changing for people to come into new programs. Just because you're going, when the old coach leaves and the new coach comes in, you're going to have an exodus of guys. Maybe they follow that coach. Maybe they're just, they came because of the coach, which is a lot of times. So just the ability to get past that stop number to get to 30 and 35 and 40 and so on is life-changing.
I'm a guy from Florida, covered recruiting in the 2010s in Florida. And I remember Greg Bryant really well. So I remember like when I saw that y'all were in on Greg Bryant, I was like, that's a name that other kids might know. Like, did that help legitimize your return process?
Yeah, 100%. Greg was an elite 5-star. If you want to say 5+, a guy who had been dominant at Notre Dame as a freshman, had really bad grade situation. And when we got Greg, I still remember I was speaking in Mobile to a quarterback club down there, and I get on the phone with this guy named Greg Bryant. And I mean, we were talking to so many hundreds and hundreds of kids, and there's Greg Bryant, and we just hit it off. And he came in, and I still remember before he went back home and ended up in the horrible, getting killed. He had gotten a 2.75 GPA at UAB. I remember him coming in my office with tears in his eyes and said, "Coach, I've never even come close to this." He was just so proud. And, I think at that first spring we had about 58 players. And so but to see him, just in that brief time we had him was just unbelievable. But yes, he did help legitimize. Just his name alone was a big deal.
Because that's the players recruiting other players.
Exactly. And that happens so much. And, that's what, when you get those kind of guys, and I'll say this, it was very interesting, the group we had, because we had guys from New York, California, Arizona, Miami, you name it, we had them from there. And bringing this group together was, as I always say, that'll be in the movie someday. But, you're talking about some really big personalities. These guys, you're talking about a lot of 3, 4, 5. We had a few 5, but, a lot of 3 and 4-star guys that had been heavily recruited at big time places, and a lot of grades, where they just didn't go in and do their job. We didn't take bad people, but I think just to get those guys together, so you really had a lot of strong personalities, but Greg was very, very special.